So guys, today we're going to be talking about the iPhone XR here. I wanted to revisit some of these older iPhones because I'm starting to notice that they're actually dropping in price. I was pretty excited about this one because when I bought mine, it was at around 300 bucks, right? So now this one, the XR, the renewed refurbished one, is now at 238. And I think the lowest was 236. But even on eBay, these are starting to trend much lower. So again, last year when I bought mine, around 300, close to 300. Now it's coming down to, I think, an amazing price at under 250 bucks now. And you just get a ton for what you're paying for, especially compared to other phones in its price range. So if you got a mid-range phone, I want to tell you why this older flagship is more superior than some of these mid-range phones. What kind of makes this thing stand out at this price? Now, I want to talk about the number one thing to me that stands out on this phone at this price point is actually this Apple A12 chip. So for this price point, this chip is still extremely good. So if we go into graphic settings in PUBG, we're able to play at HDR Extreme and even all the way up to Ultra HD. So this is a very good gaming phone for anybody on a budget. So the specs on this one, again, the A12 Bionic chip, and then we also have iOS 15, the latest version on here, 3 gigs of RAM with 64 gigs of internal storage. I really like the speed on this phone, the gaming performance on here. I think it's great. So if you're on a budget, right, and you want to play games at high settings, Call of Duty Mobile, whatever, this phone does a pretty good job. So I was really happy with performance on this phone in general. Also, something to note is that this phone will get iOS the next few years of updates. So iOS 16, 17, 18. I see this phone getting these updates just because of how fast and snappy everything is. It is a very fast phone. Even comparing it to a 13 Pro, you're not going to see that big difference in speed. So even if I just like your casual applications and stuff like that, it still opens up fairly fast. As you can see, fairly competitive, even with the newest 13 Pro here. So I do really like the performance on here. And just for you guys that want to see the Geekbench scores, boom, and here are your Antutu scores as well. So this phone does great. So you can compare those to even some mid-rangers and see that you're still getting excellent performance with the XR. Next, I want to talk about the build quality. This is actually one of my favorite feeling phones in the hand, and it's not a super massive phone at all. So it's one of those phones that you can easily kind of one hand. I think the only thing that might make it look a little bit outdated is just because it has a single camera on here. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's a full glass and metal design here. It's IP67 dust and water resistant, but this design feels much better in the hand than the more, I guess how you would call it. Like, it's just kind of like cuts into the hand a little bit. I don't even know what you call it. It's got these really sharp edges on the 13 Pro series. And on here, you can see that it's more smooth in the palm. That's one thing I noticed immediately. So I really like this design on the XR. It still feels extremely good in the hand. Alright, so next I want to talk about the display on here. It is an IPS panel at 6.1 inches. It is what Apple calls the liquid retina IPS. It's 720p plus, and then it has 326 for the PPI. The panel itself, I think for your average person, it's still fairly sharp. Of course, we do got the notch up here. It's still fairly sharp. It's not an OLED panel, right? But for an IPS panel, colors look fine and it gets fairly bright. So I actually don't have any issues with it. It's not like it's a bad IPS panel. It's not washing out or anything like that. So display on here is fine, 6.1 inches. It's pretty good size for people with smaller hands as well too. So if you have issues with bigger phones and having to shimmy it and do all that stuff, this phone is a comfortable size. So I was able to use this phone without feeling like it's too big or feeling like my hands are straining or something like that. So I do like the size of the phone. Display again is fine. It gets fairly bright as well too. Now, one of my favorite things about the XR is actually the speakers are actually pretty crazy on here. I'll go ahead and let you guys hear it max volume. So what I love about iPhone speakers is that usually on other phones, the top speaker will not put in as much work as the, bottom speaker. But as we can hear, if I cover this one up, I still get good bass quality out of this one. It's still fairly loud. So I really like the speaker quality on here. The vibrations on here are pretty good as well too. You definitely would be able to hear your phone vibrating. And yeah, so just talking about some of the other features, of course you have Face ID on here that works flawlessly as well too. You also have your Apple Pay on here as well too. So you have a lot of the same features that you know and love on the newer phones. It's still on the XR. It's not like it's really lacking or anything like that. So I think the most important thing about this phone is how are the cameras. So I think that's a big thing with this phone. Surprisingly, the cameras are still pretty good. I actually still get kind of impressed with image quality on this phone. So it is a 12 megapixel sensor, but here's the thing about the camera, it's just one single lens. So I know it kind of kills it for some people. There's no ultra wide, there's no telephoto, it's just that one lens. But if you're not an advanced camera person and you just take, you just snap photos, right? The cameras on here are pretty good. You get pretty good detail on here, pretty good color on here. I really like the selfie cam on here as well too. I thought image quality was actually pretty good on this phone. So I actually have zero complaints at this price point, and you guys can see the shots for yourself. I think dynamic range is good. The color science is good, right? Video is phenomenal. I'll let you guys see the video quality as well too. I do not have any issues with the XR's, image quality. So it can shoot in 4K, 2430 or 60 FPS, and then it has a 7 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p 60 as well. So I'll go ahead and let you guys see the video so you guys can get a feel for that. Alright guys, here's the video on the XR here. Let me know what you guys think. Lastly, we need to talk about battery performance on here. So battery life is actually still pretty solid on this device. It's got a 2,942 milliamp battery. Now, this varies on your battery health. Now, if you buy a renewed refurbished phone, they're not allowed to sell you a phone with battery health under 80%. So we'll go ahead and just check my battery health and see what it's at. Let's just see. Where is the battery? I know I'm just like passing it. Here it is. We'll go to battery health, and we can see we're at 87%. Now, typically, most of the iPhones that I buy from Amazon usually fall in that 85%. I usually never gotten anything close to 80%. Also, battery life is pretty good on here. I'm able to get 6 hours of screen on time with this phone, which I think is pretty solid. And again, it's going to vary how you use your phone. If you're a heavy gamer, you might get 5 hours of screen on time. 5 hours and 30 minutes, but typically this phone has pretty good battery life. And as always, you can pay to get the battery replaced. I think it's not that expensive. If you could do it yourself, that'll save you a ton of money, but it's really not that expensive to get the battery replaced on these older phones. So the XR is a pretty good buy in 2022. I think the cameras are actually surprisingly good, even though it's only one lens. The A12 chip is still extremely fast in 2022, as we saw. It just plays games great, no lag, no overheating. It opens applications fairly fast as well too. I never get like hiccup problems with this phone when I'm just doing your little basic stuff, like you're on Instagram, web browsing. It does a great job video watching. So overall, it's a pretty solid phone, and I think a great device for anybody on a strict budget. Now, we are going to talk about the iPhone XS. The XS to me is a little bit better. It's a little bit more expensive now. Not by much, maybe like 50 bucks more. But we're going to talk about that and why you might prefer that one over the XR.